Just taking this opportunity at the beginning of hurricane season to remind people that it's important to be prepared, but furthermore to talk about the great work that's being done by nonprofits, by federal, state, local officials related to coastal restoration, hurricane protection, and continuing to work toward sustaining and restoring our coastline. It's frightening that we lose wetlands at such an alarming rate. And certainly we recognize that here in the New Orleans area and in South Louisiana, we represent an enormous part of the nation's economy as it relates to maritime commerce and as it relates to the energy industries. And we want to make sure that people are aware of the challenges we have and aware of the things that we're doing to work towards finding solutions to those complicated problems.
What we're talking about is an international concern, and that's climate change and climate control. Here in Southeast Louisiana, everything that we do revolves around water, how we work, how we play, and it's a really big issue as far as our economy and people's livelihood. And when you watch TV and you hear about like the glaciers and the major icebergs are starting to melt, what that says is that, that water has to go somewhere. So you're talking about an increase in sea levels, and it also affects different species. So this is not only about the United States, it's about every country in the world that's going to be affected. Our planet, we don't even live on the biggest planet in our solar system, and if the billions of people who are here, if we continue to take and we don't replenish or revitalize our planet, we're going to take resources without replenishing them, and there's just not going to be much left for our children and grandchildren.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Walt Leger III. I am a state representative from District 91 here in New Orleans and Speaker Pro Tem of the House of Representatives. And first, I'd like to thank the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation for hosting us here today beneath this new lighthouse, which I think is a beautiful reminder and recognition of our rebirth and renaissance here in the city of New Orleans. And we certainly appreciate all that they've done for our community over the years and for hosting us here this morning. We're gathered today at the beginning of a new hurricane season, which I think certainly for those of us who have been here for a long time always calls to mind the terrible event of 9 years ago, Hurricane Katrina, which devastated our city and so many lives. And while we recognize that great things are happening here in the city of New Orleans and in South Louisiana with our economy fully recovered and growing, with rebuilding everywhere when you look around, with businesses coming back and people continuing to come back, we have to be reminded that we're still under constant threat of severe weather. More and more powerful storms continue to come our way. Our coast continues to be under siege. Sea level continues to rise. And increasingly, these powerful storms come knocking each and every year. It's important that people across our region remember to be prepared, to have a plan, and to monitor the news so that they can be aware of developing weather conditions. It's also very clear, and it's also poignant at this time of year to remember that there is a call to arms. You look over to the left and see this dramatic picture of the state of Louisiana, one of the most interesting states in shape and geography that we have in this great country, and unfortunately, we see it changing before our eyes. We've all heard the statistics and the projections. We've all heard that every hour we lose a football-sized amount of wetlands, that the rate of erosion continues to increase, and that especially when natural disasters and hurricanes come our way, we experience more and more frequent wetlands loss. We also know that our wetlands provide a valuable storm surge protection and is a valuable piece to our hurricane protection system, which is multifaceted. We recognize that for every 1 foot of storms, for every 2.7 feet that we rebuild in wetlands, we reduce a storm surge by 1 foot, which is critical to protecting our communities, our businesses, and our people. Yet our coast continues to disappear. It is even projected that by 2050, that if we don't do anything to stop it, this city of New Orleans could be surrounded by all the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine that when you lose those wetlands, we all lose a piece of who we are, a piece of our history. We lose communities. We lose places that we've been. We lose fishing communities. We lose jobs. We lose energy sector jobs, petrochemical jobs, and we lose a part of our soul. The state of Louisiana, the federal government, local government continue to work in partnership to try to prepare our coastline, restore our wetlands, and protect us from future storms. Many years ago, the state created the Integrated Coastal Master Plan and continues to try to implement that plan moving forward. It's an ambitious plan driven by science that would invest $50 billion over 50 years to protect the people of South Louisiana. This year, we passed an annual master plan that will spend $725 million to continue to plan, study, and construct hurricane protection and coastal restoration projects. Even as we speak, federal, state dollars are being spent to accomplish many of these projects. Furthermore, in the eastern part of New Orleans, the East Orleans Land Bridge is being built by private dollars. And we continue to continue to try to find innovative and creative ways to ensure that we can meet the needs of our community, of our state, and of our region. We recognize, and the world recognizes, certainly the nation recognizes, that our area of South Louisiana is critical to the economic vitality of our nation, not just because of the energy sector, but also because of the power of the maritime commerce that flows through our ports. We'll continue to try to address these things. We'll continue to try to talk about these things, and we'll continue to work with nonprofit leaders, with local, state, and regional governor and federal government leaders to address these serious needs as our climate continues to change. And I want to thank you all for being here to be a part of those conversations. Now I'd like to introduce Robert Fogarty, founder of evacueteer.org and Dear World. Thank you for being with us, Robert.
Thank you, Walt, and good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Fogarty, and I'm the board president and co-founder of a private organization here in New Orleans called evacueteer.org. Each hurricane season, we recruit, train, and manage faith-based leaders, neighborhood presidents, and everyday citizens to assist the city if we ever have to evacuate people who don't own cars. I'm excited and honored to be able to address you today about climate change. You know, we said hello to hurricane season on Sunday, and we're an organization built by private citizens. And I think we're all here because we want to identify solutions and try and solve them. We know that hurricanes aren't going anywhere, and we know that the effects of climate change leave us more vulnerable. We're committed to assisting the city, the state, and the federal government to help execute a complex evacuation if we ever need to use it, the time, talent, and skills of our ordinary people. We've also begun a curriculum called Evacu Kids to educate elementary school students about how and why hurricanes form and why they're important to our region. A warming climate means hurricanes have the ability to be larger in scope, with more threat to life and loss of property. We all know that warm Gulf Coast waters mean to our vulnerabilities, and we're vulnerable in many ways. Our natural defenses, the coastal wetlands are leaving us, and the front lines just move closer to us each and every year. I'm excited and honored to be here and to listen to the other speakers today. I'm happy to introduce the executive director of the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation, Dr. John Lopez, who is a coastal scientist and who has been on the LPBF's Directors of Coastal Sustainability Program since June of 2005. So everyone, please welcome Dr. Lopez.
Thank you. I've been asked to say a little bit of what's at risk. I think Katrina's obviously already been mentioned, and New Orleans, although that event was 9 years ago, I think all of us still have vivid memories of the pictures of that disaster. Where you're standing or sitting right now is outside the levee system. Levee's off in the distance here. In Katrina, the water would have been about this high, with waves probably 3 foot on top of that. So you can see this is one of the solutions right here. You know, this structure, the base of those beams is 19 feet above sea level, which is 3 feet higher than the required base flood elevation. So there are solutions. Evacuation is extremely important. That's the only thing that really protects people out of harm's way. Things like this protect our assets. And those things are part of a broader strategy, what we call a multiple lines of defense strategy, and that is integrating those things plus coastal restoration, traditional protection measures like levees, floodgates, and so forth. The multiple lines of defense is something that also brings together administratively those things. Before Katrina, you had one state agency that handled levees, another agency that handled coastal restoration. Now we have one state agency that's working those things together. And that is manifested in the 2012 State Master Plan, where they have a whole array, a multifaceted approach has been mentioned, to our problems here. So what is at risk? New Orleans' future itself. We need the levees to help protect our municipalities, but we need our wetlands to protect our levees. And if our levees are not intact, if we can't afford to rebuild them, if we can't make them high enough, essentially the economic underpinnings of New Orleans goes away. And with that, our culture, our history, and many other things. So climate change, for New Orleans translates into basically two things. One is the rising sea and more frequent severe storms. And both of those things exacerbate our risk from hurricanes. And so the question in the future is, can we overcome those things so that New Orleans continues to be here in 50 or 100 years? Thank you. I'd like to also introduce our next speaker, who is the director for Louisiana National Wildlife Federation, and is also a local. In fact, is a high school buddy of mine, David Muth.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. Thank you all for being here today. This has been an exciting week on climate change, providing a glimmer of hope in the fight against climate change. The announcement by President Obama that new EPA standards are being proposed to fight carbon pollution. But I know that Tele is going to address that in more detail. As John said, I am the director of the Mississippi River Delta Restoration Program for the National Wildlife Federation, and that's a partnership with the Environmental Defense Fund, the National Audubon Society, two other national NGOs, and here in Louisiana with the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana and with our friends at the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation. Our mission, quite simply, is to bring about meaningful restoration of coastal Louisiana through the reintroduction of the Mississippi River into the Delta to protect people, wildlife, and jobs. As both Representative Leger and John Lopez told you, the importance of Delta wetlands and our entire coastal wetland system to this state cannot be overestimated. We are, Southeast Louisiana, we are arguably, and has been said, the most vulnerable place in the developed world to climate change. And the reason for that is that we've built a city and the world's largest port and some of the world's most concentrated energy infrastructure on top of a delta, and a delta that's already sinking. And by world standards, it's sinking very rapidly. So when you add on the effects of climate change and sea level rise, you get the equation that we are the most vulnerable place in the developed world. On top of that, 3 centuries of robbing our coast of the sediment of the Mississippi River means that we've lost 1,900 square miles, as you've heard over and over again, since the 1930s. And we're going to keep losing land unless we do something to change it. What we have to do now is to think about the long term and whether or not the work that we do as a state and as a nation over the next 50 years to undo that loss of land, to rebuild the Delta, to restore the system that built the Delta in the first place, whether all of that will be for naught in 50, 60, 100 years because we haven't done anything about runaway climate change. And that's the goal that we have to think in terms of. We have a plan, as Representative Leger said, it's an ambitious plan, it's an expensive plan, it's aspirational, but if we don't begin the task of rebuilding the Delta, then we're going to lose New Orleans, we're going to lose the largest port system in the world, and we're going to lose the most valuable fishery in the lower 48 states. So the stakes couldn't be higher. We all know things that we personally can do to slow down climate change. We can heat and cool our homes more efficiently. We can drive vehicles that get better gas mileage. We can do more with less by recycling and reusing whenever possible. But the biggest impacts on climate change will come from policy changes and solutions influenced by the messages we send to those we elect to office. We have to emphasize to them how important this issue is to us, and we have to emphasize our willingness to accept necessary changes in order to do something about it. We need to keep ourselves educated about what's happening to our planet, and we have to educate others about the big picture. The newly proposed EPA standards mark a major step in the right direction, but it's just a preliminary step. So now I'd like to introduce Tele Medina, Gulf Coast Policy Officer at Oxfam America. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, David. And I'm here today on behalf of Oxfam America's coastal communities. Oxfam is working with a broad coalition of community and environmental organizations to find the best ways to restore the environment and the economy and to increase resiliency and build community strength. We do this because it's a moral obligation. Losing a football field of land every 38 minutes is something that is extremely serious and crucial. We have commercial and recreational fishing challenges because of rapid land loss. I heard a few minutes ago Representative Leger and Representative Badnon talk about the opportunity to just go out fishing. Well, in Louisiana, we catch fish. We don't just go out fishing, but some of that existence can merely go away. You hear old-timers tell stories of, oh, I just used to be able to walk off the pier here, and now it's rapidly disappearing. Or in parts of Plaquemines Parish, you hear people say the storm surge was 38 to 43 feet during Katrina. That isn't the case of what was just pointed out about water just being here. The Environmental Protection Agency's proposed power plant rules are long overdue and absolutely essential to preventing the poorest people on the planet from unnecessary hardships because of carbon pollution. We see climate change as something that fits into a variety of different pieces. I would like to say that coastal restoration and climate change may not be brothers, but they are at least first cousins. These are issues that are paramount that we attack on a universal scale. But the carbon pollution marks a critical step towards dealing with the harmful effects of coal-fired power plants have on public health and the climate and meeting international emissions reduction commitments. More can and should be done to scale up on these targets. Political posturing should not get in the way of these basic protections. For public health, we know that droughts, floods, increasingly extreme weather are already destroying crops, undermining efforts to fight hunger, and costing communities billions of dollars per year around the world. The real question is whether these steps should be taken. Isn't whether these steps should be taken, but what more we can do to build on them. In this region, Oxfam will work with local nonprofits agencies to promote healthy living and the environment while helping communities still play a role in economic impact that happens in this region. We realize that we're in the backyard of oil and gas. We also realize that we deal with fisheries, but we want everyone to have an equitable chance to participate and to continue to live here. If our grandchildren will continue to exist here, we have to find a way to work in harmony with everyone who has a vested interest. So, now I'd like to bring up State Representative Austin Badon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Austin Badon, and I serve the people in eastern New Orleans, an area that was devastated 9 years ago. And personally, myself, I had water in my home, which was up to the height of an average kitchen countertop. Something that I never want to go through again. And just like many of you, we all went through it. We live in a community that we're based around water, and everything that we do generally affects the water environment. You know, how we work, how we play. We're always around water. Today it's a very beautiful day, but we know right now in this part of the season, hurricane season, it's a volatile situation, and you know, anything could happen where we could go from a very beautiful day one day to a catastrophic event the next day. So I would urge anybody who's listening to have an evacuation plan and be very diligent around this time of the year and have a plan as to what you are going to do. And that leads into climate change. You know, when I watch TV and I hear about the glaciers that are melting or the major icebergs that are melting, I take notice of it, because what that tells me is we have a major problem going on our very volatile planet. And we are in control of that situation. We have to do everything that we possibly can to curtail what is going on. When you hear about the glaciers or the icebergs melting, that means rising seas. That means possibly the cost of certain species becoming extinct. And this is not only a United States problem, this is an international problem. We have to do more as far as recycling to be able to better use our refuge. We have to do more to eliminate carbon emissions, to be able to curtail the things that are going into our atmosphere. Everybody is at stake. Everybody has a play in this hand, and we all have to do our part. So this is crucial to us along the coast, because our economy and our livelihood depend on it. We have to do everything that we could possibly do to make ourselves aware of this international problem. So I'm thankful to be here. When we're in Baton Rouge, Representative Leger and the other members of the legislature, we're constantly briefed on what is going on with our coast. You know, you hear we talk about loss of a football field. I can take you to places in Orleans Parish that has lost land. Most people don't realize that, you know, in Orleans Parish, if you drive down Parish Road, there are places in Orleans Parish where there used to be land. It's not there anymore. And I can show you those. We can look at a map. This is right here at our doorstep. And unfortunately, if we don't do anything about it, if we don't address this situation of helping our river to better work for us instead of working against us, the Gulf of Mexico is going to inundate coastal communities, fishing communities, and other communities along the coast. And it's going to be at our doorstep in the near future. So we have an opportunity. We know what's going on. We have an opportunity to address it and to curtail this problem. So I will offer my fullest cooperation and whatever I can do, and I'm just glad to be here to address this issue. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Casey DeMoss. I'm the CEO for the Alliance for Affordable Energy. I'm very honored to be here today to talk about global warming, or otherwise known as climate change. We applaud the EPA for their courage to implement, to propose rules that bring in the global warming pollution and will help us figure out ways to decrease that global warming pollution while maintaining our economy and our people. The rules themselves are very flexible. They allow energy efficiency and demand-side management to be used to calculate those decreases in emissions. And this is a really big deal because energy efficiency work, those investments create jobs. And those jobs cannot be sent overseas because your house has to get insulated, or your neighbor's house or your business needs more insulation in the attic. That work cannot be moved to China. We also know that the EPA is working under a larger context, a global environment that everyone has spoken about of an increase in risk to all of us, the global warming problem. It seems really big and the dangers are really scary. And a lot of people accuse those of us who work on global warming issues as being gloom and doomers or the sky is falling chicken littles. But I just want to put it in context for you in that the risks are just a risk assessment. Much like if you went to your doctor and he found out you were eating McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he would warn you that in 10 years, you're at risk of a heart attack. So what are those vegetables? Energy efficiency, renewable energy. And the good news is we've already started making investments in these policies. In New Orleans, we have the Energy Smart program, which has a $5 million a year budget. We can increase that budget. We can do more. We're also looking at renewable energy projects, ways to lower our carbon footprint here in the city, which is very exciting. And there's many, many more things that we can do. And it's not just an individual level, but it's what David Muth was saying. It's on the policy level that the big changes are going to come. So we're not telling you to just put on a sweater, or rather take off a sweater in the summertime. We want you to be comfortable, but we also need to work together to decrease these carbon emissions and make ourselves more resilient. But we have the tools right now to do it. And implementing those tools will create jobs, could actually decrease our electric bills, and let us enjoy New Orleans for many, many more years to come. Thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes our comments by the participants. I did want to invite everyone. This is the new Canal Lighthouse. It was rebuilt about 2 years ago, and it's now run by the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation, and we have a museum on the first floor here. So if anyone wants to take time to walk around, we also have a gift shop here. We had a press conference to talk about climate change. There's a lot more information coming in on climate change, and it's a consensus that it's not a question of if it's going to happen, but that climate change is happening. All around the country, seeing manifestations of severe weather events. Of course, Katrina and Rita and other hurricanes in the past are reflective of things that might happen more often in the future. So we're here today to just reinforce this message about the importance of understanding climate change and dealing with it.
We are losing a football field of land every 38 minutes, and in places such as Chauvin and in Terrebonne, Louisiana, some may say we're losing about 3 inches of land per year. As seas rise, as we deal with issues of pollution, which are things outside of necessarily coastal issues, as far as what we're going to see, what's going to happen with hurricanes, we need to be very clear that those two things go hand in hand. As seas rise, is one of the simplest explanations. We will see greater impacts during hurricane season, as we just started on June 1st. So it's essential that we pay attention to what's happening all around us, not what's just happening in our backyard.
What we're doing is we are actively engaging with business and industry to encourage and try to get their support to help us. Because, here in Louisiana, we're in what is considered, in some cases, Cancer Alley because of the vast amount of emissions that go into the air, into the water. So we're working with business and industry to try to get them to understand their responsibility and to reduce emissions and to reduce the amount of toxins that go into the air and to the water.
The state legislature has enacted an integrated